Welcome to Real Human Design Stories, where guests share their powerful personal stories of transformation through human design. I'm Kathy Bochonko, an intuitive human design mentor and guide to radical self-trust. Join us as we explore how your human design experiment can truly change your life. Hi there. My guest today is Amanda Horvath, a 4-1 Splenic Projector, juxtaposed cross of risk. Amanda is a videographer turned YouTuber turned human design analyst and unapologetic deep diver. She helps entrepreneurs decode their human design chart, shed misalignment, and connect to the divine guidance we all have access to. Her approach to human design is to help you master the frequency of self from a felt experience, helping you click out of the mind into the wisdom of the body. She lives in Austin, Texas with her husband Sam and her toddler Maverick. And I met Amanda in Santa Fe at the High Desert Human Design Conference. And we had some lovely chats, and I've had a couple chats with her since, and I'm really excited that we're finally having a chat with all of you here listening with us. And so I just can't wait to get started. And Amanda, I'd love for you to just say hello and then just tell us your human design story.
Absolutely. And we actually we met in Colorado the year before.
Oh, I'm so bad. You're right. I do remember.
And then we really deepened our relationship
we just chatted a little bit there. We didn't have any real one-on-one moments, but I do remember that now. I just in this moment did not remember.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my story, I guess I'll start in college. I went to film school, did that whole thing. Studied documentary filmmaking, and after graduating, I was determined to graduate with a job. I was like, I'm going to a film school. I don't want to be that person that pays for school and then doesn't have a job. So I had 6 internships while being in Hollywood, in Los Angeles, working, and basically discovered all the things that I hate about the world of video and filmmaking. And intuitively, what I really looking back, it made sense. I'm not a generator. I'm not someone that is designed to stand on set for 12 to 15-hour days. And I could feel that, and I could feel that I needed to do something different. So I had a short flirting relationship with working for a short period of time for a film festival. And then very quickly after that was like, you know what? This is a total disaster. They still to this day owe me a lot of money. And I was like, if they can do this, if they can run a business, why can't I? And so I stepped out on my own and started pursuing the entrepreneurial career of shooting and editing videos for clients. At some point, I moved back to Austin, and there was definitely a very strong splenic hit that was like, go back to Austin, where I was raised. And it was a totally different city than when I first moved here. And also had another splenic hit that was step in front of the camera. And I was like, I'm a behind the camera kind of girl. I'm not a before, in front of the camera. And I denied the voice for 2 years. I was like, I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this. And then all of a sudden got an invitation from a mentor that was like, you should step in front of the camera. And it all just began aligning. I made it happen. And thank God I did, because the first year that I transitioned from being a videographer into the course business was 2020. And I was determined to go all in on courses with my one course in 2020. And I would have been out of a job. And so that spleen was protecting me in advance of you need to switch things up. In May of 2020, I found human design. And I describe it as I was very quickly connected with Barbara Ditlow. So Barbara Ditlow was my first exposure to human design, other than watching one video by Raquel Reina, who I also love. I watched that on YouTube and was like I remembered the moment of watching it and being like, wow, this is so profound. I can't wait to learn more about this. Got on the call with Barbara I describe it as saying hello, and she told me my entire life story. Like,
Can I back you up though? Like, how did you even hear about it?
yeah, it was, it was really interesting. I was invited, or I had a friend that we were kind of like peer level people, like influencer type individual, who she had all of these programs. I had worked with her. I'd helped her create YouTube video or brand videos and whatnot, and never actually like worked with her. But then she was like, "Hey, I'm doing a mastermind group," and something inside of me was like, "Join that." And it didn't make sense logically. Like, why am I joining this? And I make a joke, but that the one thing that came out of it was human design. So in the group chat, someone said, "Hey, do you know your human design?" And I was like, "What's that?" Looked it up, the confusing chart, watched that one video by Raquel, was introduced to Barbara. And yeah. So Barbara, did a reading for me, and I was just shocked. Like, how could a stranger know this much about me? And I hung up on the call. I went on my way to try to investigate this deeply. Not even, I guess, being aware that I was an investigator, but Barbara, the way she does readings, at least when she did it with me, she's not pointing anything out on the chart. So I started from scratch. Like, I was like, there's something here, but I need to decode this further. So, bought the definitive book of human design, started watching tons of videos, which at the time wasn't as big as it is today, right? Like, there weren't as many online resources, very few podcasts. I started listening to the Human Design Collective podcast, which was fun because all of it's like in Austin.
I think everybody spent the pandemic making human design content because it feels like it really exploded the availability. Because when I was looking in 2019, and actually when I first looked in 2016, there was like nothing. And when I started getting really deep into it in 2019, there were not that many people.
And it was like cryptic, and it was hard to decipher on your own. And I was grappling with it. I was struggling with it as someone with the channel to struggle, I suppose. And so about 6 months later, I book another session with Barbara, and I'm like, "Barbara, I want to know what you know. Like, how do I learn this system? I feel so called to it." And meanwhile, I was, launching online courses and doing that whole thing. And in the first year of my online course,
the courses were on videography, or
yeah. So it was really me teaching business owners how to shoot and edit videos on their phone, and different tier levels. Like, if they wanted to do tier 1 level was their phone, and then mid-tier camera, high tier, and really systematizing the entire process of how do you actually edit videos on your phone. Yeah. And she was like, "Oh, I teach classes." And I was like, "Done. I'm taking all the classes with you. Like, teach me everything you know." And so I immediately dove in, took all the foundational classes. And then all of a sudden she stopped teaching beyond the first 3 foundational classes. And I was like, "What is up with this? Like, I want to keep learning from you. How do I keep learning from you?" And she's like, "Well, you could either go to IHDS, or you could just listen to raw content." And I considered the IHDS route, but the idea of having to sign a contract right at the beginning before you take one class was not cool with me. Like, there was something that was like, you can't change the information. You can't, like, they own you essentially if you take classes with the IHDS.
Yeah, that I am very aware that a lot of people might not know that, but that is something that deters a lot of people because you basically aren't allowed to have a different thought about anything and to express it without risking your certification being taken away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And being kicked out of classes. And so I had talked to Leanne Wolf. I had connected with her. She has a big YouTube online presence.
Yeah, I've had her on the podcast. She's awesome.
She's awesome. I love her. And she talked to me about her story and everything. And I was like, as someone with an online presence, like, I don't really want to sign this contract. So I began just collecting audios from raw. And I am one of those people that does value listening to raw audios. Some people don't. I've now collected over 800 gigs of raw files, including PTL 1 and 2 and 3 and all that. And so
PTL is what?
That's basically the professional analyst training. that you would take with the IHDS. And then fast forward, this kind of coincided with me having my first kid. I ended up getting unexpectedly pregnant in 2021, and I was with my partner at the time, but we weren't yet engaged, and we were planning to do it that fall. So everything got a really sped up timeline. It was my Saturn return, and things started to kind of snowball in terms of getting everything in alignment for becoming a mom. And so there was this, I had this online presence. I had built this business that I wanted to have passive income by the time that I was 30 so I could be a stay-at-home mom. That was the thought. And I had done it. But then Human Design was showing me that there was these things that I was doing with the online course business, and I was following all these manifesting generators and doing it their way of how to have an online course. And I began to experiment with, how do I do this my way as a projector? So the story continues. I went through, I had to kind of ride the wave of what I had built for many years. And then once my son turned 2, it was like, all right, time to experiment and see how I can maybe pivot into human design. I don't want to be the expert because I really value the people that are out there with it. I would rather curate the voices of people that are the experts. So through a series of events that has now turned into me creating a human design documentary on the original people within this human design system, and very deep diving into the foundations of how did this thing come to be, from what's from the voice and what was developed afterwards.
Wow. So, okay, I'm going to back up a little bit, because first I want to unpack, what did Barbara say that stands out the most to you, that you were like, how does she know me? Like, do you remember like anything that you feel comfortable sharing?
I've re-listened to that reading in so many times. Like, I've gone back to it, and I really suggest that anyone that has had a reading in the past, like, go back to it. It's so powerful.
Mm-hmm.
It was, I mean, there were so many things. I think the fact that she was a projector and she understood the projector life, like, there was a big quality of that. Like, I think being someone that has an inner knowing about things, like, especially like I see 43 is my personality Mercury. So that's how I communicate. It's through insights, but I don't really have the ability to express those insights because I don't have 23. Granted, we've been in a long transit.
For those watching, it's 43 is at the bottom of the ajna, pointing towards the throat. But so it's, I always say it's the base of the funnel, right? Like, it's where it all comes out. But it's like if the funnel didn't go all the way to the jar, right? Because the throat is down here, right? Yeah, I get it. Okay.
Yes. No, I love that. I actually haven't heard that description. That's great.
That's mine.
And then being 100% individual, as with my only channel being the channel of struggle, like that combination of the two, like, she explained it as, we tend to be the queens of an unsolicited advice. No one wants to hear it, right? And I resonated deeply with that, and the bitterness that can come with having, like, I see what someone needs to do, but then they're not listening, was a big experience of me in my video marketing business. I was working with some really top tier clients, which I can't publicly name, unfortunately, for NDA purposes, but one of them being Ryan Holiday, and another one, and like other businesses too, where I'm like, I remember trying to convince people in my business, like, video is the future.
Right.
And obviously it is the future. So that really was
present.
Now we're here, we're beyond it. But all the things I was saying then were definitely real. Yeah, so that was one of the big things. I think the receptivity was a shocking one. I have 7 open centers in my chart. I didn't necessarily see myself as sensitive, but as I began experimenting with it, I began seeing just how sensitive I am. And now I'm very aware of it, to the receptive energy of those around me. And I've learned to really work with it in a different way and feel less like at the mercy of the energy around me and more like sovereign in who I am in having done this work at this point.
So being in this very 3D world of literally 3D world of video, teaching videography and business and all of this, and then finding out that your energy is so different than 70 some percent of the planet that world is all run by. You said there was a time when you realized you needed to change how you did your courses. Can you elaborate on that? What do you see as the difference between the way a projector runs a course versus the way, say, a manifesting generator or generator would run a course?
Asking for a friend, right? So I think the way that I initially understood it and the way that I think about it now is different. I think that, at the time, I'm a big fan of Amy Porterfield. I give a lot of the success that I've had to Amy Porterfield. She's a manifesting generator. She's, if I can remember, I know she has the 952, the 515, and I want to say the 4426.
She does a lot about email marketing, right? Isn't that her?
Yeah, she's all about building your list, and she's the queen of courses. She makes $2 million in 10 days.
Yeah, but she doesn't teach anything human design, though. You just know her design.
No.
Yeah, right. She's
so, this is pre-finding human design. She was the person I was learning from, and she's a manifesting generator. So her approach to doing courses, like I kind of felt like I was sold a bill of lies to a degree that the course business is this passive income strategy, when in reality, it's not. Like it is, but it's also like you put a ton of work in and cross your fingers and hope it works.
Right.
And then you do this big launch, and depending on how well that launch goes,
right,
you have to wait a certain amount of time before you do it again.
Right.
And like I actually did really well. I did like 100,000 in my first year of the online course business in 2020. But there was something that I was starting to become aware of, like, do I know when enough is enough? And am I pushing myself too hard? And I also grew up in a family of emotional manifesting generators, every single person. Well,
there were a few others too, but a lot of
them. My sister is just, she's a generator. So same, but I had been very, and not only my immediate family, but aunts and uncles, all manifesting generators. And so I began to ask the question, like, how does this look different for me? So I really slowed down massively. And then, of course, motherhood played a role in this as well. But I would say today I am essentially rebuilding my business from the ground up. And I am amazed at how much longer it takes for a projector to do it in alignment as they built. Especially a splenic projector that's like waiting for that hit. That's like, clarity comes. Now this makes sense. Now let me put it together. Operating in bursts versus like sustained energy. I think ChatGPT has absolutely changed the game. I'm obsessed.
Me too. Yeah. For projectors, it's like, oh my God.
It's like this generator that's always available, never tired, ready to work.
Let me ask you this. As a projector, do you find that even with ChatGPT that you don't always know when enough is enough? Because I'm always like, well, let's make it a little better. Let's make it a little better. Now let's do this. And then I'd get really, like I used to like be writing something and I'd be saying, okay, let's change this part to reflect this more. And then we would get it. And then I'd be like, no, you changed all of it. Wait, like, and I've started to learn to like work a little bits at a time, right? But it was funny.
Well, now I don't know if you've played with the canvas aspect. I could go on a deep rabbit hole with ChatGPT, but now it has like a canvas option where it pops
up. Sometimes that glitches in the whole middle of it, and that has been a nightmare too. So everything has a learning curve. But yeah, I oftentimes will find that because of all of the depth that's available in ChatGPT, I have a tendency to go a little too perfectionistic and start to go too big. And often I will create something and then go, okay, this is too much. Let's scale it back, right?
I definitely have that tendency. I think that is a very wise thing to be focused on, because I often do the same thing. It's the fact that you can speak to it. So if you're listening to this podcast and you guys don't know that you can do this, this is life-changing, especially as a projector, but I think other types as well, that you can externally process, and then it structures your thoughts.
Yeah.
So you get the app, and then on the phone, you can talk to it using a microphone.
And even if you're not making anything specifically within it, the ability, I think, well, all projectors do a certain amount of verbal processing, right? We soundboard to a certain extent. But I always say part of me feels like a self-projected projector because I have a triple split with the 1/8. So I feel like I verbally process, feel what it feels like in my spleen, to see if I get a hit as I'm saying it, feel the clarity over time then of what I've said, right? And I'll process again over the course of my wave. But there's all this talking, and it can be annoying as hell for those around me because I'm always talking about, they're like, oh my God, didn't you decide yet? No, I haven't decided. I have to keep talking about it. But I can talk to ChatGPT now. And it's really neutral.
Oh, it feels so good.
It's great when you're processing about people that like when you're complaining about your husband. Processing about your husband. And, if you ever have a friend who's always processing about their partner to you, you can get a really tainted image of what their partner is like and even what their relationship is like. And I've realized that people sometimes think a lot more harshly of that person then because they're only getting that because you don't need to process the stuff that's not, right?
100%.
So being able to, I've had whole marriage counseling sessions with ChatGPT.
We have too. I had my husband and I both sit down and do a therapy session with a specific GPT called Mia, which is like a life coach therapist type. And I'm sure I could find one specific, because if you go to chat, I know this is probably way more technical, but I think it's valuable. This is the future. This is the now. If you go to ChatGPT and then you see the Explore GPTs,
right?
Click on that.
You have to have the paid version to get into that part, but it's totally worth it for $20 a month.
It's so worth it. And so we took turns, give your 5-minute approach, give my 5-minute approach, and have it kind of be the mediator. And it was amazing. And then at the end, okay, can you recap what are Sam's main problems and what are Amanda's main problems? And then you have it right there, very clearly from an outside perspective, It's amazing.
Yeah. It's super fun. So anyway, that was a little side note. So you're going back to your story, because I feel like I totally derailed you. But somebody needed to hear all that. Somebody's going to have a lot of fun with, or make a lot of progress with soundboarding with ChatGPT now, I'm sure.
Well, I think this is why projectors are the future, because of AI. We are here to guide AI, and that freaks a lot of people out. But hey, I'm a pure individual, and I've learned to just accept that I will freak people out.
Yeah. Elaborate a little more on what you mean by that, because I think I know what you mean, but I don't want to assume.
So individual circuitry, it's on the spectrum of genius to freak, right? And in my opinion, or the way that I've really learned to work with it, the best example that I've heard Ra describe is it's like a caveman. The individual is like a caveman sitting outside of his cave, bored out of his mind because he's tired of being cold all the time, eating, plants all around and whatever, and he's rubbing two rocks together, and boom, there's a spark, right? That spark is what the individual lives for. We live for these intuitive hits that come right now, especially as a splenic individual, in the moment, that create this aha moment sensation. And often, based on timing, that spark is either too early or properly timed for the collective to grab onto it. So then the collective takes the spark, and they're the ones that turn it into a fire. They tend the fire, they chop the wood, they create jobs around the fire, they sit around and share stories around the fire. That is the experience of the collective energy. Meanwhile, the individual is over here like, guys, I invented fire. It's already done. Let's move on to the next thing.
That feels like it would be a good description of the manifestor energy too, like the initiation of the spark and then the collective generator, sacral energy building the fire. And then this, maybe the projectors over here going, keep it that way. You're going to burn the village down, right?
But there might be manifestors that are collectively focused, right? Like True. The collective is never bored, while the individual, there is this kind of, underlying melancholy flowing through us to a degree. So coming back to this concept of like the genius to freak spectrum, it's like the person that buys a house in the gentrified part of town 10 years before it's cool. You're crazy. What are you doing? That's dangerous. And now they're selling their house for millions of dollars. And the exact same people are saying, you're a genius. How did you know? Right? And so being okay on that spectrum, that some people, like, nothing has changed in me, but the collective perspective of what I'm talking about is changing based on time. That's what I mean by like accepting the freak in me to a degree.
What do you mean by the collective is never bored?
The collective always has more experiments to run and more experiences to have. So there's always something to do, right? And not even necessarily do. There's even something to talk about. The logical circuit loves to talk about things over and over and over and over again. Like you can always do it again. And then you can always have a new experience.
Build a better.
So, yeah.
What's the saying? Build a better something. I don't know. Build a better everything. But there's a saying. I can't think of it right now. Two open ashes trying to grasp our two right-facing minds, right? With like whatever we're trying to pull out of there. So. Yes. Yeah, and then the abstract too. There's always the trying to figure that out. But I've never really thought about it the way you're talking about it with the individual. But yeah, I mean that makes sense. So the part there was like 6 things you said, and I think I lost them. So I'll just trust that the right ones will come up when I want. When they need to, if they need to. But so you were talking about. That you started going back to doing things after your son was like 2, you said. And then where were we at with that? Do you want to?
Yeah. So, it was in some ways being a splenic individual that doesn't know when enough is enough, and yet coming to this knowledge and asking that question constantly. It was like hyper awareness of that. Like, you were going through a lot. I pumped for 13 months because my son never latched. So that's like a big physical drain on the body. Right. And then also had an emergency C-section. So like the body itself was like adjusting to this phase, and then the mental side of how that's working and whatnot. So the first thing that I did, and I think in some ways where I've kind of moved, is helping other people pivot. We're in an extreme time of pivoting. Everyone's pivoting right now. And this is really what I've been doing over the last 4 years to a degree, in a very slow approach. The first step is like, you need to survive, right? So you need to get a certain amount of income so that you're not having to like work to get that amount of money coming in. And so I had started to offer an incorporating like video marketing and human design in one-to-one coaching. So for many years, I ran from one-to-one coaching. I wanted to do one-to-many. I had a one-to-one business where I was shooting and editing videos for clients. It didn't feel aligned. Then I got into the online course business where it's one-to-many. And then it was learning I was a projector. I was like, why am I hiding from one-to-one? That is my superpower. Let me just dive into it, charge a higher price point, and have 5 clients instead of 100,
Mm-hmm.
And so I started doing that and started slowly testing different systems and things for how does this one unique individual market themselves? How do they uncover their message? What is their message? What clues can we pull from the chart to develop that message? And then let's talk about the tangible, right? It's about balancing the masculine and the feminine. The feminine comes a lot through human design. It's the energy, it's the approach, but then there's the masculine. What camera and mic am I going to use? Both matter. So I began doing that, and then, yeah, I mean, it's kind of now evolved into a very different, I don't know, the way that I think about human design today has changed a lot in all of the interviews that I've been doing with early adopters. And I really deeply value the centers. And so, like, my main approach right now is like, how do we make the foundational information, how do we get people through the foundational information faster so that we can begin having these practical application conversations? Because the conversation that you and I are having might be a little hard to track to a degree if you don't have the foundations.
Yeah, right. Hey, just popping in for a quick sec. I know we're deep in conversation, but if you're feeling called to dive deeper into your human design experiment, I'm here to guide you. Whether it's a personalized reading or one-on-one mentorship, let's explore the next steps towards radical self-trust together. Visit KathyBochonko.com to learn more. All right, back to the conversation. There's so much more to explore. Last episode that I published was with Brandy Jordan, and she gave this great metaphor of human design being the raft, not the shore. And once we get to the shore, we can leave the raft, right? And so I think that's important. And, I'm still 8 years in, and I'm still on the raft at times, right? Because there are so many deep layers to human design, or times where I'm like, am I on the right shore? Am I real? Did my mind get me to this shore? Is this really where I've wanted my body, my soul has wanted me to go? And so the raft is still kind of tethered there in case, it's still there. I use human design big time. But human design is not the destination. The goal is not, okay, I have mastered understanding my human design. I'm one, right? Human design is just a tool, and there are many tools. And human design itself is a combination of many tools synthesized into this wholeness of another system, which is then itself a part of other systems. And some people are like, oh, well, that's not human design because it's not the original stuff from the voice, right? But we still talk about, we still use terms from the I Ching in human design, and it's not the I Ching. It's part of the I Ching is in human design, and some people will even say there's a certain amount of cultural appropriation. Most people will say there's a lot of cultural appropriation in human design because it takes these bits of systems and doesn't really do them justice, because as we learn, we can't all be, like if you go to medical school, you learn a certain amount of foundational stuff, but you can't know everything about the brain if you're a cardiac surgeon, because you have to know everything about the heart. But the brain certainly impacts the heart, right? So I don't know. I just feel like it's all related, and I just went on one of my little tangents, but
it's all perfect, Kathy. I love it. Yeah, I agree. I really love how Brandy is approaching human design. I think it really actually aligns with how I like to approach it too. This concept of, it's so many people get trapped in the mind about it. Mm-hmm. It's, I am this, and so therefore I need to do this, or am I being correct? Am I doing it correct? And then they add these shoulds to themselves when the whole point is to break from the shoulds and to understood what is, like, who am I really? I personally believe it's like, who did God design me to be? And like, what is the path that God is telling me to take moving forward? by tuning in with myself, by clearing the noise of all this external energy coming in, especially as someone with a 7 open centers in their chart, then being able to say, okay, what's next? And I don't need to see the big picture. You don't need to understand. It's just a matter of like feeling into the body of, this is what's right for me. This is what's next. And it's like a hand on your back, like guiding you where you need to go. And that's how I see human design, is through that lens. And the more that I explore these conversations with people of like the early adopters and the controversy around human design and how type wasn't a thing for 10 years, when human design was created, I think it's really fascinating because in some ways I value raw, and I have considered myself like a traditionalist in human design. And yet there is a difference between the message and the messenger. And you have to pull those things apart and like look at what came from raw, iterating this information, right? And what came from like the original message. And he even said, this is an experiment. And yet the IHDS does not want you to experiment, right?
Yeah. And something not in any way to diminish the experience of this voice speaking to Ra for it was a very long channeled experience. It was not like, a lot of people I know experience channeling, but I don't know anybody who's had a channeled experience that went nonstop for, was it 8 days?
8 days, yeah.
Yeah. And, that was really dramatic. And so not in any way diminishing that, but if something, we're evolving as a species, and there's all sorts of research out there. If you listen to, I think it's Greg Braden talks about it, and Joe Dispenza, about how our DNA is actually changing. We are changing as a species now, not even talking about the human design mutation, but maybe that's actually leading towards it. And to say that what the voice told Ra in 1987, is the end all be all. There are people having all sorts of experiences and upgrades and things that are happening. And what was said is going to happen. I don't believe that anything is ever set in stone, right? So even some of the things about the mutation that Ra said the voice told him, there was all this stuff about the, I think it was it the Mayans that said that the world was supposed to end in 2012. And what I have read is that we shifted that by raising the elevation, or not the elevation, the vibration of the planet to a higher level of consciousness. So we averted that. And I think that there are constant times where we have these tipping points, much like a person. I've heard that there are our soul, and I'm forgetting where it comes in because it's just somewhere in my ajna there. I think it was Bashar who talks about that we come into this life, and there are certain points in our life that we have set up as like jumping off points where we can say, nope, I'm done. This isn't working. And those are times where we can either choose to continue or choose to go onward. And I feel that everything is a bigger version of, like, we are little universes. So the universe would have the same thing, right? It's going to have jumping off points. But if things change enough, if enough people, if our bodies get healthy enough, and our souls are happy enough, and we're doing the things, we're not going to jump off at that point, right? Well, I think the same is true of the universe. And this idea that the rave, there's a lot of people who talk about, even some of the things Barbara Ditlow says about the rave prophecy with what not having children after 2027. I do not believe that's going to happen like that. I think it's going to be a beautiful thing to see what happens because we're raising our consciousness and we're having these genetic upgrades in this 24th chromosome that's coming back online, and all of these things. And I just rambled a whole lot. So I wonder what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, no, I think it's fascinating because one of the trending topics right now is this concept of new earth. Have you heard about this?
Yeah.
Like it's like the new earth versus the new world order, and how there's two trajectories that we are on. The new world order is like, you will own nothing and be happy about it. That
Right.
kind of very like almost moving towards a dictatorship kind of approach of life.
Dystopian.
A dystopian reality. There's a lot of fears that you can lean into on that front. And so when you're looking at the 2027 split, there's kind of like that same energy of like, where are we going? Are we going to go to this like dark reality where when you listen to Raw talk about the rave children, it's freaky. It's like basically these children that are going to be sitting and in their own aura, in their own space, like kind of blank to the world. Like there's not interaction from the outside. And so there's going to be a lot of turmoil over as we as a species are changing into this kind of evolved being that is able to sit and, not be as impacted by the solar plexus emotions in the same way that we are. Like, there's going to be a lot of turmoil in that conflict of me versus you, like this versus something new or whatever. And it's really fascinating. There's something that just went around, the telepathy tapes. Have you heard about this?
I have, but I've not felt the.
I haven't dove into it.
Me to listen to it. I've been curious, but it hasn't.
I haven't listened to it fully either, but I listened to some of it as my husband was listening to it kind of in the other room. And I want to circle back. I just haven't had time. And basically the concept is that it is like proven that there are children today that can telepathically communicate with their parents. They can feel the things that their parents are thinking, and they can answer. And it's like enough studies to where this is no longer like it blew up.
Like the indigo children?
I think that's slightly different. I think that was maybe like the predecessor or whatever to this, maybe. I'm not totally sure, to be honest. I haven't like dove into it as much. Other people might be listening to it like, yes, who knows? But like Joe Rogan had talked about it, and that like blew up. Like basically this podcast became even bigger than Joe Rogan's podcast, which is like kind of a big deal.
Right.
And so when I heard that, I was like, that's really interesting. To me, that sounds like the rave children. And so it's recognizing them at a different different level, to where we're starting to kind of like hold space for differences amongst us and how to work with those. So coming back to like this split, you got the New World Order, which is everything's terrible. And then there's this other side that's like New Earth. We're all heart-led individuals that are tuning into ourselves. We're moving more into the age of the individual. And I respect your individuality. You respect my individuality, and how we approach these things. And it can be a little bit more harmonious. So I'd say traditional human design leans a little bit more towards the negative.
Yeah. And then we have stuff like quantum human design, which some people say may lend to like their polarities in a lot of cases, right? And I just had a conversation with someone who was saying they didn't see themselves when they got a reading in the quantum language, because they couldn't see themselves in that, because it was so like everything is wonderful, and it was telling them all of their highest expressions. And I think that could also have been the person who was explaining it to them, because I do think quantum human design does talk about the lower expression of things as well. But this thought that came into my mind, which is, the whole concept that energy can neither be created nor destroyed, right? So when we sit there and we have this fear of if there is going to be a different type of child, and it's going to have something that we think is so different, it's going to have something else that there's something else that for everything that is taken away, something else has to be increased, because it's not like there's any one person, child, adult, whatever in this universe that has less divinity, spark of life, than the other. They just express in different ways. And so for everything that is taken away, something else is given. And when we focus on what's missing all the time, that's what grows, right? We just focus on what's missing. We feel what's missing instead of looking for what's given, what's the extra gift that's there. And I think there'll be something really amazing that comes out of all of it if we don't get caught up in the trying to, oh, things are different. This is not how it used to be. So.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, human design is not about knowing the future. It's about how do I interact in this, especially like even for an emotional individual, how do I interact right now? Even though you're going to gain clarity over time, we're still operating in the present moment.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I really connect in with the divine guidance side of it. And obviously that's not a take that Ra had of it, but it's been helpful for me to kind of see it through that lens. It's there is something greater that is guiding us through our authority. And it's we almost need to name what is the thing guiding you, because you're opening yourself up to energy to be guided by something, right?
So to me, the first thing that came to mind was I'm guided by my body, but I don't mean my body as in my hand or whatever. I mean the energy, the way things feel in my body versus what my mind is telling me.
But where is that coming from? Right. So I agree. It is your body.
Yeah, but I can, like you said, like I was saying before, I verbally express something, I say something, and as I'm saying it, I've learned to really tune into not what is my mind telling me, how am I getting uncomfortable with what's the, I read cues of how people are responding to me, but instead of worrying about that, I really feel in my body, what's my body saying? And I do feel with my defined spleen that there are times that I speak where I feel this yes, I honestly don't know if that's my spleen because many people tell me their spleen is always is much louder in the nose. And for me, the no is really quick, but there's this thing that happens when I'm speaking and saying something where I just start talking and all of a sudden I start saying something. And then there's this feeling in my body that is yes, what you are saying is true and important, right? It's this and I don't know exactly where that comes from, but I feel it really intensely. And that's, me listening to my body. And that's how I operate a lot of times.
Yeah, no, I'm with you 100%. I think people that are trapped in the mind with human design, it's a dangerous thing to a degree because the whole point is to kind of escape that reality of having so many things happen here and the monkey mind and the mental chatter and all that. And human design, the thing that resonates for me is it gives you something to chew on so that your mind can be busy so that you can tap in with the body and follow that. So,
yeah. So I have a couple more things I want to talk about, and I really honestly don't know what time we started recording, so I'm trying to not make this be too crazy long. But I would like to hear a little bit about, you said you're making a documentary, and I'm wondering if that's something you feel like you're at a point you want to talk about.
Yeah, I can talk about it a little bit.
How that became part of your story.
Yeah. So I'll share the way that it came part of my story was an interesting journey. For those that have listened to your podcast, they know that there's another documentary going on, right? The two are unrelated, but they began together, right? So in 2022, when I had, my son was born in early March and it was December 2022. So I was still within the 1 year of having a baby. Someone asked me, if you could do anything and time and money wasn't an issue, what would you do? And my answer was I would fly around and talk to early adopters of human design and really interview them because, I have this background with video and I don't want to be the expert. I would like to curate the voices of those that are the expert in human design. And I've gotten such value from talking to Barbara and having her be my point of contact. But then as I described, she had stopped teaching classes. She's now, thank God, she's starting to teach classes outside of the regular 3. She's actually stopped teaching the foundational classes, so she has more time for the other stuff. But at the time, she wasn't. And I was like, I would love to just deepen my understanding through these individuals. And so at the time, that was not possible. I'm attached to my baby,
Right.
Yeah, all the things. But I kept it there. And I even had a conversation with Leanne Wolf at one point talking about that. And she's like, I think you just need to keep putting it out there, keep putting it out into the world, see what happens, see what unfolds with it. And then at some point it might happen. And I was like, okay, cool. I had done a couple of videos where I started the process. I interviewed Barbara, got her story in a very highly edited story format on my YouTube channel. And then did several other ones with a reflector and a manifesting generator to kind of start the process of it. But it was a lot to manage to do that at that level of production every single week, right?
Yeah.
So I kind of put that in the background. I'm innocence motivation. It's okay, I really do focus on that, the whole innocence motivation. And so I let it go. And then in June of last year, I made the decision to pull from savings. I put a huge chunk of my savings that I'd hard-earned savings from the years of business that I've been in, put it into a account called Safety Net. So Amanda Horvath Safety Net. And I allowed myself to accept that I would deplete that money with the intention of fully letting go of initiating and leaning it 100% into the invitation. Let's just experiment. Let's just see what happens if I do this. Give my body let go of needing to post weekly on YouTube, allow myself to continue creating, but see what came from it without the pressure of creating on YouTube. So I started doing that. And within a month, I got a message from Celan, the director of the other Human Design documentary, that was like, hey, I'm creating a Human Design documentary. I would love to talk to you about it. And I was like, anything you need, let's go. Let's make this happen. Came on board. It was amazing at first. It felt super aligned. The people that she needed connected with, I had already talked to about this very project. I had all the skills, all the documentary filmmaking background. And her and I were on good terms. She's, whatever. But we both agree that our energy together is a lot of tension. She's on the cross of tension. 3 people on that project are on the cross of tension, which is automatically makes them compromised to my channel of struggle. I have 38 5 times in my chart, and they had 38 as their sun sign, right? So lots of interesting energy that was unfolding. And so at one point I had a splenic hit that was this is not healthy for you. You got to step away. And previous to that, she was like, I think you should release the tension, go create your own documentary. And I said, okay, cool. That's an initiation in my eyes from a manifester. So then slowly things began to unfold. The invitation to, it was hey, why don't you introduce this person or interview this person, this person, this person, this person? And suddenly it just lined up. These are the people I'm interviewing, including Richard Rudd. It was hey, Amanda, Richard Rudd's going to be in Austin on Thursday. Do you want to interview him? Yes, let's go. Let's do that. And it's just continued to unfold in that way. And I've just been allowing it to happen and letting it sink into my cells. I'm doing deep
For those who don't know, Richard Rudd is one of Ra's original or very early students who then went on to have his own mystical experience that evolved into something called the Gene Keys. I don't know if evolve's the right word, but it branched off into something called the Gene Keys that is a different expression of some of the same energy. So, I don't know.
Yeah. And so I'm exploring conversations with people that are both traditional human design. For example, Genoa Bliven, he's the founder of Human Design America, or not founder, but director of Human Design America. He's awesome. Loved his energy. And then also like getting to the point where I'll interview his teachers as well and like lining that up and wanting more people on the traditional side. And then I'm also exploring the evolutionary side. So I really, as a 4-1, especially with innocence motivation, and I'm working with another projector who also is innocence motivation in these interviews to really show up. And my goal is to tell the stories from an unbiased perspective as much as possible, and then let the audience decide what they think.
How far are you with this project? Do you have an idea of when?
I am really allowing it to unfold organically and naturally. So, and I really am being intentional about the voices that I interview, because like my main criteria is, were you there? Like, did you learn from Raw? And I think it's really interesting because I want to get more people that are pre-97 in the film. And so I'm currently working on that.
What's the significance of 97?
97 is when type was developed.
Ah, okay.
And so technically, if for someone that was there at the beginning, they should be there in 93 or earlier, right?
Right.
And so I want to get...
It took Ra, they said it took Ra 5 years to recover from the experience and actually begin to teach it, right? He had the experience in 87, but he didn't really start to do any, like...
I think in 90, he decided that, and I've been digging into this timeline a little bit more and am connecting with different people to like really tie it together, because I want to do it justice, like I genuinely do. And I believe it was in 90 that he began taking this and actually spreading it, and it began in Germany. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of the transcripts are very weird from his early lectures, because they were actually translated into German and then translated back into English. So you don't have the original transcript of those teachings.
They weren't necessarily recorded where they could be transcripts made again, or were these lectures that did not get recorded?
I think some of them in the beginning were not recorded. Yeah. And then over time, I actually really respect Ra and his media background, like the fact that he was on YouTube like right away. Amazing. Like he did a really great job of documenting as best he could, and like hiring certain people in different places to document, like Richard Beaumont like traveling around England with him to document a lot of those lectures and different things. And so the main story that I'm currently digging into is the Zeno Chaitanya version of it. So that'll be a fascinating one too.
Yeah, they were early teachers with him. So, and we could have conversations about all of this. And I probably should have started with all of this sooner, because everybody's going to be like, I want to know more about this, but they're going to have to wait for the documentary for all of it. So how many interviews would you say you have so far that you're holding on to that are for this documentary? Roughly.
9.
Okay.
We're slowly getting into it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, I'm really looking forward to when that comes out. The last thing I just wanted to touch on briefly, because I keep having people on that are 4-1s, and then I keep saying, "Oh, we never talked about." You always hear the 4-1 is a fixed fate, has a fixed fate, and I know what I've been taught, but I'd really love for someone who has the 4-1 to explain what that means to live. First, just for those, like maybe people listening will have no idea what the heck I'm talking about. But 4-1s are the only ones who have what's called a juxtaposition cross. And I think I said juxtaposed or whatever at the beginning, but juxtaposition cross. And they're said to have a fixed fate. And I'd love for you to just take a few minutes and talk about what that means to you.
Absolutely. And I've attracted a lot of 4-1s into my life and had this conversation quite a bit with other people as well. So I'll share it from my experience and then, see if there's anything else. But I think it's interesting because as a 4-1, our network matters a lot. And that has been apparent for me from a very young age. I always joke that conferences are the best place for a 4-1 because, you could go to the networking events, but you can also go when you're like tapped out and you have people fatigue, which 4s definitely get people fatigue. Then you can tap into the investigator side of you and go to the lectures and the talks and whatnot. So we have this juxtaposition in that we can be the lower trigram energy of self-destiny where we are investigating something. And then we have the upper trigram energy of the 4 line that is more transpersonal, where our destiny unfolds through the other. And so having like feet in both camps is an interesting thing because on one hand, what I investigate is what I investigate. And so my fixedness in some ways comes from what I investigate. What are the things that I have dove into? Where did my projector fascinations lead me to dive into? And so I'm going to form opinions around those investigations and I'm going to share it with my network. And then it goes both ways. My network is going to enhance the information that I have and the people that I talk to that is going to then like change what I investigate, right? So the two kind of go hand in hand. And so the fixedness in my eyes is I am investigating something that is my fixed kind of approach to it based on what I encounter, and the people in my life are fixed. So you can only encounter so many people in your life, right? And so this fixedness, and I have not heard anyone talk about it from this lens, but this is my experience of the fixedness. It really comes from that quality. And then I think the other side of it is there's concept of being a bridge between two worlds. I really resonate with that. The ability to hear two sides and then I'm also a middle child, so like be the mediator in a way between the two sides without having, because if you're a 4-1, you automatically have innocence motivation too.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's like this innocence quality where I can like, and then an open head, open ajna, where I can like hear various different perspectives and kind of filter it through without having this like attachedness to it. That is also really has been beneficial in my life, and can form that fixedness as well, I suppose.
With 7 open centers, I think that's almost a safety thing that you have with this fixed fate, right? Because this 4-1 energy, as I'm hearing you say it and as I understand it, is that you can do your investigation, you can hear what your network has to say, but you are fixed. You are not changed. Who you are is not changed by all those things. So having these 7 open centers in your design and feeling all this energy, it maybe has never had, you said, at first you said you didn't feel sensitive. And I wonder if it's that fixed fate and innocence motivation that has always kind of kept you from getting into some other, like some people with 7 open centers would be like feeling the things, right? And hiding from them because they don't know what to do with it. But
I'd say I'm still super impacted by the 7 open centers, like my direction and the emotions and these different things. But it almost like now I see it as more of a gift of being able to, especially as a projector, like feel that person at a deep level, maybe deeper than they'd like, right? Yeah. That's the projector reality. And so it's not that because I'm a 4-1, the fixedness, I wouldn't say it's necessarily like a protective measure. I think it's just that one other thing that actually came from Jonah Dempsey that I really like, his description of it, he's like, the 4-1 is like the zeitgeist. It is I'd have to look up the exact definition of zeitgeist, which I could do very quickly. Let's see what it says. The defining spirit or mood of a particular period of history as shown by the ideas and beliefs of the time. So because of when we're born and what's going on in society, right, we are kind of fixed to whatever that is right now. So we're like very tuned into the energy. of, once again, what are the people talking about? What are the things that are open to investigation, and like reflecting whatever's going on with society. And so there's another fixed component of that, in that, yeah, you're impacted by the era.
Okay. So what are you doing now if people wanted to connect with you? Obviously, I know you're working on the documentary, but you've been a little bit, I noticed you're doing more on Instagram and such now, right? You've been experimenting with that a little bit, or?
Yeah, so it's been interesting as someone, the undefined throat and letting go of attracting attention has been a really interesting silencing quality for me for a while now, of coming out online after years of weekly video content. So I described last year as kind of like a tearing down year. It was like consolidating, pruning, clearing out the tech, getting things simplified in my business, which I see as gate 40 in my chart, cut excess, like working with that in the my prosperity sequence. I have gate 43 times. And then this year is like a build phase. So I'm about to complete some really epic, in my opinion, like introductions into human design that are introducing it via the 9 centers, not via type, which I think a lot of people introduce via type right away. And I think that can create a little bit of a problem from the beginning because people oversimplify. So I have a 9 centers guide that I'm very excited to get out into the world. That then once I finish that funnel, that will go into like a foundational, my version of Living Your Design, essentially, course. Then I'll get back out on YouTube, and I haven't announced the channel just yet because I've been wanting YouTube to do the organic pushing of it. But it will be under Frequency of Self. And that will be a channel dedicated exclusively to human design nerdiness that is not necessarily attached to me as a person. Like I can have multiple voices and multiple things on there. So that will be an avenue in and of itself. And then I'll continue my Amanda Horvath YouTube channel that will be more of continuing to be my creator journey and how I'm navigating the world today. Because I wasn't fully ready to give up my personal brands.
If somebody wanted to connect with you specifically, personally, though, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Yeah, I would go to frequencyofself.com for all the info related to human design. And I really suggest getting on my newsletter because it's such a personal take on how I'm moving through like all of this, and a behind the scenes look, and you can always hit reply and I see those replies. That's probably the best way.
That's awesome. I don't think I'm on that newsletter yet. I don't think I've been invited, but I will now take this as an invitation for myself too. I will say though, the whole thing you said about speaking with the centers, that's why the very first in-depth report that I created, and the first time I ever offered any kind of a course, they were both about the centers, because I think people just kind of give them a brief overview and they're like, okay, I know what my not self things of my open centers are. And I know, and that's all. They don't pay enough attention to it, in my opinion, because it's really where the true wisdom is. Not just whether it's undefined, open, or defined, but is it undefined with one particular gate, or do you have 6 hanging gates on this undefined center? And what are those gates? Are they your sun? Are they your Mercury? Those sorts of things. And really, so I created a part of my Your Ultimate Human Design Guide to Radical Self-Trust. The first in-depth one I did was the centers. And at first it was going to be part of a bigger report that was everything. But that particular report had so much meat in it that I was like, I can't give anyone anything else with this. They'll be overwhelmed. So it's its own standalone thing that people purchase. But you would, when you download it, you'll get, it's like 100 pages for one person. There's so much just understanding the centers. So
There is so much to understanding the centers. And then the other thing is like the simplification of just having this question to ask for each of your open centers. If you know nothing else in human design and you just have that one page, that is transformational, in my opinion. Like just one question. Do I think I have something to prove? And letting go of it will change your life.
Right?
Yeah.
That would be the undefined will center.
Yes.
Yeah. Or in some cases, even the defined will center, because I do feel that a lot of times we can feel that not self in our defined centers if we're taught that we're too much in that area, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, okay, I'm sure we're way over time now, but it was worth it for everybody.
And I'll throw it into, if someone does want to Instagram me, it is Frequency of Self. So you can also reach out via that as well.
Okay. Awesome. Well, I've really enjoyed this little chat, and I hope that that the documentary, I know it's going to happen in the time it's meant to happen, but I am looking forward to it, not trying in any way rush the thing, but it's got to be a really exciting thing to just enjoy the process of you creating this. I know how much I enjoy these conversations I have during the podcast, so I can imagine you going and being with these people, because most of them have been in-person interviews, right?
Yeah, I'm starting to branch out to online interviews just to speed things up, specifically with people in Europe.
Yeah.
That'll be the next move.
All right. Well, thank you very much. And to everybody, peace out. Thanks for joining me for this episode of Real Human Design Stories. I hope these stories help you see how human design can reframe not only your own story, but also the stories you tell yourself about your relationships. If you're ready to tell a more empowered story about who you came here to be, I invite you to explore ways to work with me directly at kathybochonko.com. Supporting this podcast is easy. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a 5-star rating, comment, and share with your friends. This helps the podcast grow the most. You can also become a contributing sponsor for as little as 99 cents a month. Details are available at realhumandesignstories.com. Thanks again for being here. Real Human Design Stories is created and hosted by me, Kathy Bochonko, and produced by Number 3 Productions. Peace out, everybody.